we are oftentimes too close as business owners to the problems that we're dealing with. And if we bring somebody in to the organization that thinks differently, but is really good at what they do, the value of your time with that person, ultimately getting you to a place where you can scale the business. So I think it's important to identify the gems that you have in your business and invest in them, because they ultimately become the future of the business.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another weekly edition of the Business Coach Podcast. I'm your host, David Finkel, and I want to welcome you today. Today, we have a treat in store for you. Coaching Director Rich Wood, the Coaching Director for Maui Mastermind, and myself are going to dive deep into how it is that you can make intelligent decisions proactively about who and how much and how to invest in your best people to generate real returns, greater growth that can compound over time for your company. For those of you who don't know Rich has had a 30-year business career, very successful one as a principal and key leader in multiple different companies that have scaled, some of them quite large. He's been a business coach now for, over 20 years, helping over 1,000 different companies grow and scale where the owners can increase their profitability and regain control of their time and life again. He's also a good friend. In this conversation, we're going to get into how do you spot the types of people that you have in your business. Who should you invest just technical training energy into, and who should you give more of a global training to help them develop, not just as a person doing a specific job function, but as a business leader and as a business person? How do you know that? We'll go into what percent of your revenue should you, as a heuristic, as a shortcut, should you think about to reinvest back into your businesses? When is it too little? When is it too much? How do you look at measuring the return on investment, and how do you plan this out proactively? We even talk about 7 different ways to invest in your people, some of which are using external resources, some of which using internal resources. And my favorite part of this week's episode is when we dive into the best ways that you can coach for development, is the term that we'll use, with your best people. And to do that so that you deepen the learning, not by giving them the answers, but by coaching them through a thinking approach, by giving them a series of questions, and we'll demonstrate, we'll role model for how that goes. That's all waiting for you in this week's episode of The Business Coach. Rich, welcome back to the Business Coach Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy my time spent with you.
Yeah. Well, I know you've been involved with lots of different companies, and today we're going to talk about this theme of investing and developing our key people, and ways of knowing who to invest in and what the ROI on those investments look like. And before we get really kind of into the meat of what we're going to talk about today, I guess I want to hear from you. I'm going to ask this question. I'll answer it myself first, which is, you and I both love to continue to read and to listen to various things and to learn, to invest in ourselves. And since our theme today is about developing our key people, and I want you to share something that you've learned recently, or a way that you've invested in yourself recently. And so I'll start us off. One of the ways I found for me that I find most enjoyable for my learning nowadays is I find people who have expertises that are outside of my expertises, and I find ways that I can get into conversation, really diving deep into what they have and know, and asking a lot of questions from them. And so I was having this conversation with a technologist. I'm technology fluent, but I am not highly savvy in that world. And as I was talking with him about things, I picked up 2 different ideas on how we can, in a business place, use AI. And actually, one of the tools I got, a particular new device that I just click a button and it starts recording, and it gives me my transcript, my summary. I can program it to have words like action steps, and it gives me a summary of my action steps. And it's some of the things that some of the other tools, if I'm online on a Zoom or on a Microsoft Teams meeting, it'll do for me automatically. But I wasn't getting it in meetings, and I wasn't getting it in direct phone calls. And I found that was quite cool for me. What's something for you, is something that you've learned or picked up recently in your lifelong learning?
Yeah, so I am a lifelong learner, and I continuously read. I continuously expose myself to people that take me to a different way of looking at the world around me. I tend to focus more myself on reading those things that help root me back into the reasons why I do what I do. So for me, I tend to be kind of a workaholic. I've been this way my entire life. I'm one of these goal-oriented, very driven kinds of people that will continuously work until the job is done, not just done well, but done very, very well. So I have this challenge with work-life balance on an ongoing basis. And in the books that I tend to look at and read, for me to help me develop is things that root me back into, you have to have this balance, because if we work all the time, then we lose sight of the people in our lives that are important to us. We lose that important family time. Then what's the reason or what's the value in working all the time? So for me, I'm a lifelong learner about trying to achieve a balance in my life. And I think that's important, not just for me, but for everybody out there that's a business owner. Or
I think that's great. I love that reminder, which is a friend of mine who's one of my mentors. She said, David, what matters most? And she asked another question, which is for the sake of what? And so as we're working hard in our businesses, what's this for the sake of what? And do I want to sacrifice the thing that I say this is what I'm doing it for? Doesn't seem to make a good choice with that. So I think that's an important one. So as we talk about today about developing people, I'm going to start us off with a story and kind of set up the case that we're going to use. And I'm going to use today 2 different cases of actual clients. I'll change names to be respectful. But the first one is a guy who runs a very successful contracting business. They do painting services. I'll call him Joe. And Joe, in his world, he has started to do a really great job of having his sales team be able to sell their core types of jobs. So they do a lot of residential painting. And over the years, they've started to cultivate this ability, and they do a lot of that. He's started now to try some new sales strategies with some more of his commercial clients and building that division of his company. And that division is quite profitable. The projects are 10 to 100x larger. It just makes good sense for him. And so he was talking in there about, Rich, he was talking about how he was going and having these lunches with people who owned the decisions for his types of services, right? And he would go sit down and have lunch with them just to check in. He's a very personable guy. And that was his new sales process. And it was working. He had like 5 lunches and picked up 3 projects from 5 lunches. And I remember talking with him. I said, well, this is good, really good. And for you to do these lunches right now makes absolute sense. You're the person who knows how to have these types of conversations. But you have a sales team. How are you investing in your sales team to learn how to have these types of conversations? Or is it your plan that you'll do this conversation with these types of people for the rest of your life and for the rest of your company's life? And obviously that's not the case. So I said, well, why don't you start doing 2 things? Why don't you start investing by bringing not just the same salesperson, but bring different salespeople to different of these lunches or meetings that you're having. Let them shadow and look in, talk with them afterwards, have some follow-up afterwards, have them write up their lessons or insights. And when you come out of a meeting, pause and pull out your phone, put on the recorder, and record what did you do in that meeting that worked well? What were some of the questions you asked that worked well? What were some of the things you observed or spotted in the answers the other person gave? Just debrief it right there. Now that audio and the transcript is starting to pull out of your brain what took you 20 years to develop in terms of expertise, so you could pour this into some of other people as a first stage sales system. The better sales system later on will be scripting and rebuttals to objections and other tools that will be useful. But this is a first stage for this, so that you're starting to cultivate other people. As we see that, Rich, this thought about, I don't want to be the one doing this all the time, but how am I investing back in my staff for them to grow and groom? And I guess I'll start off with, why don't more owners think this way? Like, why don't they think about investing in their better people? I notice there's a little reluctance. They see it as a cost sometimes.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I've experienced with many of my clients is they don't see the value intrinsically in spending the time to cultivate the people below them. And I think when I see that happening, one of the things that I encourage my clients to think about is that the only way that you're going to grow and scale your business is to learn how to effectively delegate to other people that are as good at what you do or better. So I think it's important for us to be open and willing enough to surround ourselves with people that are indeed better at what we do than we are, or better at services than we are, or think a different way than we do. And I think a lot of times that business owners don't really think about hiring people that are as good as or better at things than they are. And I think that they limit themselves by doing that.
It's interesting, this idea that they surround themselves oftentimes with people who they don't recognize, in fact, are or could be better at narrow pieces of the business. I know a lot of business owners have, I'll call it the curse of competency. They're very good at what they do, but because they think they're very good at what they do, they start to equate that in their brain as that they're better than somebody else. And yet many times somebody else could be as good or better. They just might do it differently. And that different might in fact be where the owner sees it as less than, but really the marketplace result shows it as equal, on par, or a better result. And I notice that a lot. And I know 20 years ago in business, I really struggled with that. There's a little bit of hubris when I was in my mid 30s where I knew it better, I was better. And I've learned that there's such a high cost to holding on to that misbelief. That's why 20 years ago, I was working probably 65, 75, 85 hours a week and traveling a week and a half every month to go do the function of the businesses I had back then. How crazy is that?
Yeah. So one of the things that brings to mind as you say that is that we live in a business world, in an economic environment that is constantly changing and constantly evolving. So we as business owners don't have the lock on all the great ideas. We don't have the vision on everything going on. So I think it's important for us to bring in really skilled people into our businesses that bring a different perspective. And I think that word perspective is important because we are oftentimes too close as business owners to the problems that we're dealing with. And if we bring somebody in to the organization that thinks differently, that looks differently, that acts differently, but is really good at what they do, that different infusion of energy, insight, ideas, in a way to do things differently brings a different perspective on how we can grow the business. And I think a lot of business owners don't look at that opportunity through the people that they bring into their organizations.
Yeah. And so now if we think about it and we move beyond, I mean, the best business owners, I know this, they look at developing and investing their people. Yes, they consider cost, but what they really drives the decision is return. And the level 2 business owner who gets stuck in an owner dependent company, that middle stage level 2 business owner, they see it just as the cost. Should I pay this much? And so training and developing could include things like sales training. It could include time with you, the owner, where you spend an extra half an hour or 45 minutes showing them how to do something or showing them your thinking about how to approach something. It could be working with outside coaching or external trainings or internal trainings, or maybe you give people a chance to participate in something they normally wouldn't be exposed to, or a chance to run a project or a meeting that they normally wouldn't get to do. So I noticed for a lot of business owners, they dwell on cost, where they not take the next step and ask, what will this likely produce? How can I measure what it would produce so that I can know it was a good choice or a good investment?
Yeah, so there's two elements of cost. There's a dollar cost and there's a time cost. You know, I think a lot of times business owners don't reflect on the time cost associated with bringing in really talented people. If I bring in somebody that's really talented and can do a great job, that frees me up as a business owner to go off and grow the business. So it gives me an opportunity to move from working in the business to working on the business. So I think that when we bring in really talented people, we should be looking for those people that we can delegate to provide a return on investment that's not just dollars, but also time, because that's what we need to have to scale the business. And I think a lot of business owners lose sight of the fact that it's an ROI on time and dollars.
Yeah, and that can be internal people and that can be external people that kind of do that work. And I'll give another case example. One of the large medical groups we work with, we probably coach a dozen other key managers and leaders. And yes, they're paying a cost for that, our services from that. But what it's producing for them is it's giving them a way to have a lot more development attention per team member for those key leaders than they could do internally. So for every 1 hour of coaching, it saves them probably 3 hours of doing it. Plus, we're more efficient with it. And then from the financial standpoint, it's paid off handsomely. They've grown probably bottom line profitability by probably 100x their coaching cost. Again, I guess I tell people all the time, Rich, this should not be something you need a calculator to generate a return calculation. If it's close, you shouldn't do it. It should be so blatantly obvious. So for example, if I send 4 of my sales team members to an external sales team training, and they go from selling each at $100,000 per month to selling at $150,000 a month, an extra $50,000 per month spaced over a year, that's $600,000 of additional sales times 4. That's obviously worth $20,000 of a training cost. It's not even close. And even if they sold an extra $10,000 per person times 4, and my cost was 20 grand, it's paying for itself. And I usually tell people that the training or development input to somebody, you should see a payback in that certainly within 24 months, but likely within 12 months, which means if it pays for itself within a year, that's 100% return on investment within a year. And subsequent years make that return even greater because you've already been paid back.
Yeah, so that brings this word compounding to mind, right? So we talk about compounding of growth over time, much like if we put $1 in the stock market, historically over 30 years, it's going to compound and become $30 or $3,000. So the concept of compounding with people applies just as well. When you bring somebody in talented and you give them training and support and mentorship and great leadership, the value of your time with that person, that individual, compounds progressively over and over again, ultimately getting you to a place where you can scale the business to level 3, which is you as an owner become an absent owner in terms of your day-to-day involvement in the operations. So people should think about the compounding value of their time and investment in people, because that's really where you get tremendous leverage.
Yeah, and we're going to be smart about who we invest this time and other resources into. For example, if I've got a team of 26 people, I'm probably not going to equally invest in all 26. I mean, quite frankly, I'm going to make the distinction that probably some of these people are role players that I might spend some money developing them in their role to be more efficient in their role. But probably there's some percentage, 5, 10, 15, 20% that are grow players, not role. And those are the ones I'm probably going to put more into. So if I've got my 26 team members, there might be 5 or 6 that I'm going to put more energy into. And there might be 20 or 21 that I'm going to coast with for a while, putting some into. But the training for those role players will be training specifically about their job functions. How can they do what they're doing better, versus this training for these other people will be more generalized. I might have someone who runs marketing, but she doesn't know how to read financials. And so when she is doing her return calculations for different marketing tactics, she's not able to tie it into the bottom line. So maybe I'm investing in her to show her, hey, here's how the financials work. And here's how you can look at the gross profit generated per marketing tactic per dollar spent, or something like that. Or I might have someone in my operation side that helping him learn about negotiation will make him a better purchaser, will make him better about dealing with other outside vendors, will make him better about dealing with customer issues. So I make that distinction between my really truly grow people, which I invest heavily and in a broader, more globalized way, versus my role players, which I give them highly specific, small bite-sized pieces of training in their job function. And I watch to see that they are able to ingest that training to produce better. And if they don't, then I probably don't invest a lot more in those people. I accept that this is the level of performance from that. But those that do that, I invest more and see what the return would be. Where these people that are my grow players, those are the ones that I test giving a lot more resource to over time.
So I'm a big believer in forecasting and budgeting and planning. And I think it's important that, much like we will develop a CapEx budget at the outset of a year about how we're going to spend money to grow the equipment or hardware of the company, I think we should also identify a budget that we use to invest in growing our key team members and growing the people that we're going to eventually entrust the business to as the business grows. So I think it's important to identify the gems that you have in your business and invest in them because they ultimately become the future of the business. So go ahead and develop and build into your budgets this training budget that you can use to improve the quality of the team that you've got and invest it in those people that you're going to leverage to grow the business. Obviously maintain the role players in their jobs and their functions, but invest in the people that you entrust the future of the business to.
Yeah, and when you think about how much to invest with it, I mean, I'll give a couple heuristics here, Rich, and I'm curious what your take on it would be. I'll commonly tell somebody that 2% of revenue is probably a pretty good number as a baseline. You can go up to 5% of revenue, but more than that's probably a little bit out of balance. And if you're less than 1%, then you're running your machinery, your team at redline, and you're going to have breakdowns with that. You're going to have some real issues with that. And so if I have $1 million business, that's probably $20,000 to $50,000 as a reasonable range of budget. If you have a $10 million business, that's probably closer to 200 to 500. And what I'll hear from people is they'll say something like, gosh, I can see why a $1 million business would put $35,000, $40,000 into developing its people. They say to themselves, how do I put that same $300,000, $400,000 into my $10 million year company or my $100 million company? And I'll laugh and I'll smile and say, look, you do get some economies of scale. But when you look at what it means to put money into it, it doesn't mean you're hiring outside external training for all that. Sometimes it's just making sure that your key managers and leaders have budgeted a percentage of their time, 5% of their time, that they're going to reinvest in their best people to develop them, to coach them, to give them opportunities to try new things where they can now observe, let them know what worked well, and give them specific next times that they can coach on to be even more effective there with that.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind when you say that is you have to be intentional with the investment. You have to be directed with the investment, and you have to be focused on how you're investing the dollars to get the maximum value out of the people and the training that they're receiving. But most importantly, make it a proactive process, not a reactive process, and build it into the business culture.
When you talk about proactive versus reactive, or give me an example. So in this case, proactive, is this kind of going back to your beginning of the year, thinking through if I've got 42 team members, which are the 8 team members I'm going to give my very best to, and then these other people are going to be more job specific. But what do you mean by proactive in this case?
So proactive is something that you're looking ahead in the schedule of training programs that are publicized, formalized training programs that you can slot key staff that you have working with you into the schedules that might be a year out or 6 months out. So part of it is proactive from a educational timing perspective. The other part of it is proactive that might be going to job fairs or going to trade shows or things like that. And the other part of it might be market-driven opportunities that you're specifically training up to be prepared to take advantage of an emerging opportunity at some point in the future. It might
That makes good sense.
Talented skill or something of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, that's, now that I hear you say that, I think about, like, if I'm working with a coaching client, I'm often looking at, and for us collectively in the Maui community, we have our quarterly series of advanced classes that we do with clients. And so coming up might be systems and controls, or grow your sales, or the financial pillar super course, or the hiring super course. And so what I'll do, Rich, on the beginning of the year, and I know you do the same because you lead our coaching team to do this, which is to proactively plan out and say, hey, Carl, this year, these are the events coming. Let's get clean on who are the people from your staff that should either be there in person or should be there virtually and do the streaming portion for it. And how can we plan that out in advance? These 3 people should be at this training. This one person should be here. This group of 6 people should be sitting in a conference room doing the systems and controls portion themselves. And how do we make sure that we can think that through? And how are we going to view afterwards to make sure that the ideas and the value from that training get circulated, recycled back into the business to create value?
Yeah, so being proactive helps you identify who and where and when but it also helps you identify dollars, and those dollars get factored into a budget. So you've already planned for it way ahead of time at the beginning of the year. So it's not we can't send Joe to the conference because we didn't squirrel enough money away for his airfare or for his fees. So it's about being proactive to the process. And I think doing that will help set you up more prudently to get the results for the business that you're looking for.
I'll share a tip for our audience here, which is when I'm developing a person, if I know this person is someone I can see is going to grow beyond their current role, we call that a grow player.
Right.
It's common that I'm tempted to just give them answers, feed them what's in my head, feed them what's in my head. And that's about as effective at putting somebody in a daily lecture. It's just not a very effective learning style.
Right.
So instead, I feed them a series of questions. Hey, I'm going to put you in this situation. Imagine I was hit by a bus. How would you handle the situation? Like, pretend, like, here's what's going on. If I wasn't here, what would you do? Okay, so I hear you would do X. Why would you do it that way? Good to know that. What else, though, might we be missing in that answer? I use questions which takes me 2 or 3 times as long, but it gives them 10 to 50 times more learning out of that experience. And so I really like that as a technique, that if I've got 9 direct reports, of which 3 are really my grow players, I don't want to give them answers. I want to give them the opportunity to figure things out with some guidance, nudging them, but I want them to struggle through the answers themselves, because that disfluency, that struggle to find it, will mean that the learning is 10 times deeper.
2 stories come to mind. The first story that comes to mind is when I was growing up, I would always ask my mom, what does this word mean? And she, even though she knew the answer, she would always say, I don't know, go look it up. But that process forced me to develop skills at a young age that says, if I don't know something, go figure it out. The other story that comes to mind is the story about the young boy that finds a butterfly cocoon, and he brings the butterfly cocoon home. You've heard the story before, I'm sure. And the butterfly starts to pop out of the cocoon, and he opens up and he breaks the cocoon, and the butterfly comes out, and then it falls off the cocoon and dies. And the story for the young boy is, in order for that butterfly's wings to develop, it has to go through some stress and some anxiety to develop those muscles. And that's the same kind of scenario. People learn better through doing. And one of the things that I teach my flying students is that there's a process of, this is what we're going to do, then you're going to do it, and then we're going to talk about what you learned through the process. So it's the point is, you have to expose people to those situations that force them to develop the muscle memory over time. And that's truly how you develop people.
I think that's great. And someone's going to say, Rich, well, that takes a lot more time to do it that way. And that's why we're not going to do this with everyone. We're going to pick and choose. But I just want to come back to this idea of, when do we, like, I see this pattern. I have clients that get excited by the idea of developing their best people, and they pour in. And I pause and I say, well, you've been pouring in and pouring in. Let's look at this here. So imagine that each of these people was a flower pot, and you poured into these 6 flower pots. How did you decide which amounts to pour into each person? They said, well, I just, as much as I could as it came up, I just poured. Okay, so you have this watering can called your day. And as you found water in there and you came across that flower pot, you just poured in there. Did you notice with any of the people that some people can only take in a little bit of water before the soil is saturated? And they go, I've never thought about that. Okay. Well, what do you think happens when the soil is saturated and you keep pouring in more because you have more water in there, and you keep pouring in more? What happens? Well, you wash away the soil, you overwhelm it, you drown it, you get mold, it just doesn't work. And I go, okay, well, consider that. That's right. Consider that. So they go, okay, and they start being more judicious, a little bit here, a lot here, medium amount with this person. And then I ask the next question, did you notice that any of these people aren't really, like, sometimes when you pour water into this pot, did you notice that any of them had a plastic cover, so that no matter how much you poured in, it just washed over the outside edges, because this plastic cover over the soil was like an umbrella taking all this care, love, and attention of yours and just basically ignoring it. Did you know? Oh yeah, 2 of these people were just like that. I said, great. Do you think if you pour a lot more into them that eventually you'll dissolve that umbrella? Well, no, that sounds pretty stupid, David. Oh, okay, that sounds pretty stupid. Glad to know that. So what's a better strategy? Well, I should either tell them to remove the umbrella, or if they won't, I shouldn't bother pouring any of my precious water on those. Oh, got it. And so, Rich, I'll go through this process, and pretty soon what they'll realize is some people should get a little bit of water, some should get a lot of water, some should get a minimum, and some really they shouldn't water at all. They should leave separate to that.
And it changes over time, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that even with their grow players, there will be periods of time in their development in a business where they can absorb a lot and then they'll get saturated, and then they can absorb more and then they will get saturated. So I think prudent leaders need to be able to be aware enough of the limits of their people to know when to back off or when to divert the watering so that the muscle memory can go from short-term memory to long-term memory, because there's a process that you have to go through to develop that. I think a lot of business owners don't realize that.
I like this idea that it's dynamic. And that I want to bring one last kind of concept here, which is another mistake I see besides we water as much as we can as at whatever is most immediate to you, right? Whatever is at that moment I spot. But the second mistake I see, Rich, is this lack of awareness that when I'm pouring into people, I guess I'm going to frame it this way. When I'm developing into people with this part, we look at how to know who's going to be open to what. But oftentimes, a lot of that has less to do with what's going on in their business life to what's going on in their outside personal life, which the best leaders I've seen, the best managers, when they're working with Joanne, they know that Joanne's got something going on in her life, that now is a season that we're going to go ahead and just shore up and leave what's there. And then another time I see Joanne's really open, receptive, and hungry and aggressive to grow. This is where I make a bigger window of investment in this opportune moment. And so being aware that oftentimes it's not what's going on in the business, it's outside. And then the owner says, well, how do I know? And I say, isn't that interesting? You don't know what's going on in the lives of your key staff members. Well, what does that mean for you? What's the opportunity for you as an owner of a business? Well, I guess I should be learning more about what's going on in their life. Boy, that's a little intimidating sometimes, right? What if I learn something that's going on in their life that is painful to hear? Wouldn't you rather know about that than not, to be a better support and manager and friend in that business relationship?
It's interesting that you bring that up. And I would say that almost brings us full circle to where we started this whole conversation, which is we as leaders have to continuously be learning about ourselves so that we can become more aware of the world around us. We as leaders need to continuously develop ourselves. Why? So that we can recognize these things in the people that we lead ourselves. So we have to invest in ourselves to continuously get better so that we can be better leaders to the team around us and develop them.
That was really well said, Rich. So I'm going to use that as the end point here because we're at the end of our time together. And I think that point is really important. So for our audience here, I want to encourage you to let today be a spark, a prod, an inspiration, or a push, or a nudge, whatever you need coaching-wise, to look at your best people and how are you investing in them, and how might you more intelligently, proactively, I love that word, Rich, proactively invest in them, looking out over the next 6, 12, 18 months with that part. And what would you expect to see out of that investment? And what will you pay attention to that you see that investment did or did not pay off? And to use that to inform subsequent rounds of your people CapEx investment. I like that analogy that you drew earlier in our conversation, Rich. Any last takeaway you'd want for someone to leave here with today, Rich?
Yeah, I guess the last takeaway is that find the best people that you can around you, hire them, point them in the right direction, and then let them do what they do best and guide them along the way. And remember that you can only scale a business through the people that you surround yourself with. You can't scale a business by yourself.
Well, thank you for joining us for this week with the Business Coach, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Rich, thank you. And everybody have a great week ahead.
Thanks, David.